The blizzard came in hard and unforgiving, like the whole sky had decided to fall on the frontier that Christmas Eve. Snow whipped sideways across the plains, dragging the cold straight through rattling boards and thin glass window panes. Mara Ellison's homestead trembled beneath the storm's fury, the old roof groaning as if begging the night for mercy. Inside, a single candle flickered against the dark, barely enough to paint the outlines of Mara's 3 children huddled in blankets. Their wooden table sat in the middle of the room, bare as a gravestone. No bread, no flour, no meat, nothing but a chipped plate and a scattering of crumbs too small for even a mouse to care for. Mara stood over it with trembling hands, staring at the emptiness like it was a wound carved straight into her soul. "Mama," came a small voice behind her. It was Rosie, the youngest, barely 5 and thin from too many skipped meals. She tugged at Mara's worn skirt, her voice tiny, hopeful in the way only a desperate child could be. "Will Santa forget us this year?" Mara swallowed hard, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "No, sweetheart. He knows where we live." But the truth bore down on her like the winter wind. Santa wasn't coming. Nobody was. Then hoofbeats. The children saw the light first. A golden glow through the swirling snow, bobbing like a torch carried by someone fighting the wind with every step. Mara's heart seized. Debt collectors. She'd been warned they might return storm or no storm. Men who laughed when she begged. Men who told her that widows were easy prey. Her hands shook as she reached for the door latch and slid the iron bar into place. The torchlight stopped outside. A heavy crate thudded into the snow. Then a firm knock only once. Through the roar of the storm came a voice she recognized but hadn't heard up close in years. "Mara, open up. You're not spending Christmas hungry." It was Luke Harrow, the solitary rancher who kept more miles between him and the town than most men kept between themselves and trouble. And he had come here for her. Mara hesitated with her hand on the latch, breath trembling in the cold air. Luke Harrow wasn't a dangerous man, not exactly. But he was a mystery, and mysteries out here had a habit of turning into trouble. The stories followed him like dust clouds behind horse hooves. A rancher who lived in silence, a man hardened by loss, someone who didn't take kindly to company. But the storm was getting colder by the minute, and her children were starving. She exhaled, lifted the bar and cracked the door open. Luke stood there dusted in snow, carrying a wooden crate thick enough to hold a week's worth of supplies. His coat was frozen at the shoulders, his hat rimmed in ice. But his eyes, steady, calm, unflinching, held none of the menace she expected. "Let me in long enough to warm the young uns," he said softly. "Then I'll be on my way." Mara stepped aside. Luke entered quietly, mindful of the space, setting the crate gently on the empty table before stepping back like he didn't want to crowd her. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside lay smoked ham wrapped in cloth, 2 sacks of potatoes, dry beans, fresh-baked bread, coffee, even bundles of firewood. For Mara and her children, it might as well have been a king's feast. The children stared at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Mara forced her voice to stay firm. Why would you bring all this?" Luke shrugged off snow, staring into the crackling fire. "Because it's Christmas." "This ain't charity," she whispered, more to herself than him. "No," Luke said gently. "It ain't." Despite the tension in her shoulders, despite the rumor she'd heard and the instinct telling her to guard her pride, Mara found herself setting the pot over the fire. Luke moved to a far stool, sitting without touching anything he hadn't been invited to touch. The smell of food filled the dying house. The children inched closer to the warmth. Mara stirred the pot, feeling the weight of fear and humiliation loosen the smallest bit. Maybe it was the fire. Maybe it was the storm. Or maybe Luke Harrow's quiet presence offered something she hadn't felt in months. Safety. Dinner was simple but warm. Potatoes mashed with salt, slices of smoked ham, bread softened over the fire. The children devoured every bite as if each mouthful might disappear if they looked away too long. Luke ate slower, letting them take their fill first. When the children's bellies were full, he leaned back and began telling stories of ranch life. About the spring Luke once had to lasso a runaway calf who decided it preferred living with wild mustangs. About coyotes who sang in the night like they were holding church. About the time a thunderstorm startled his horse so badly Luke ended up hanging from a tree branch like a coat someone forgot to put away. Rosie giggled. Ben, the middle child, asked questions faster than Luke could answer. Even Samuel, the eldest, stern and quiet since their father died, allowed himself a small smile. For the first time all winter, laughter warmed the house more than the fire. When the children finally drifted to sleep, one against Luke's knee, the others curled near the fire like small weary pups, Mara lifted a blanket and covered them gently. The house felt warmer now, not just in temperature, but in spirit. She sat across from Luke, her hands trembling slightly as she held a tin cup of coffee he'd brought. "You didn't have to stay," she murmured. Luke stared into the fire, eyes shadowed with memories. Didn't seem right to leave 3 little ones hungry on Christmas Eve. Mara hesitated. Pride had been her armor, thin, brittle, but hers. Still, something in Luke's steady quiet made the truth slip out before she could stop it. "My husband, he died in a logging accident 2 months ago." Her voice cracked. "And the foreman stole what little savings we had left. Claimed we owed him." She shook her head. "Then the storm came. Ruined everything I planted for winter. And those men, those collectors, they said they'd come back." Luke's jaw tightened. "You didn't tell the sheriff?" "I did." Sheriff said without proof. There wasn't much he could do except advise me to pay what I could. She swallowed, bitterness lacing her words. "Pay? With what?" Luke nodded slowly, as if he understood the shape of her grief. And then, in a soft voice rarely heard by anyone in town, he offered his own story. "My wife died from fever. Carried our child with her." He paused, breath heavy. "I built a cradle with my own hands. Never got to use it." Mara felt her heart bend under the weight of his words. "I'm sorry. Life's been quiet since," Luke said. "Too quiet." Silence wrapped around them, not awkward but gentle. Shared pain acknowledging shared survival. For the first time since her husband's death, Mara felt seen. Not pitted. Not judged. Seen. And for Luke, it was the first time in years someone listened to the cracks in his voice without turning away. Morning came with a fragile peace, gold light glinting off snow-covered fields, breath visible in the crisp air. Luke stepped outside to fetch more firewood while Mara tended to the children, humming a tune she hadn't sung since her husband was alive. Then, hoofbeats. 3 riders approached from the ridge, silhouettes dark against the bright snow. Mara froze at the window, her face draining of color. The collectors. They rode in slow, deliberate circles around the homestead, like wolves tasting the air before a kill. Their laughter carried on the cold breeze. "Well now," the leader sneered, eyeing the extra set of footprints. "Looks like our little widow found herself a new man to pay us back." Luke stepped forward, planting his boots firmly in the snow. "She owes you nothing." The leader spat. "Ain't none of your business, rancher." "It is now." The men exchanged glances, amused but cautious. Luke Harrow wasn't a man anyone wanted to test, not if the stories about him were true. "We'll be back after Christmas," the leader growled. "And she'd better have something ready for us, or we'll start talking things that ain't nailed down." They rode off in a cloud of powdery snow. Mara stepped onto the porch, shaking not from cold but humiliation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You didn't need to get involved." Luke turned to her gently. "Nobody's talking anything from you again. Not while I'm here." Mara swallowed hard. He said it like a promise, not a boast, not a threat, simply the truth of a man who decided to stand between danger and the people who needed him. The day became a flurry of preparation. Luke began reinforcing the homestead. His movements practiced and sure. He boarded weak sections of the walls, hammered metal brackets onto window frames, and checked every corner where wind or bullets might slip through. His breath puffed through the cold air as he stacked firewood by the back door. "Mara," he said, handing her a bag of nails, "I'll take the outside. You handle the inside." She nodded, determination replacing fear. Mara organized supplies with swift efficiency, food in crates, blankets in corners, pots of water heating on the stove. She taught the children where to hide if gunfire started, guiding them gently through the motions until Rosie no longer cried. Luke checked ammunition, counting each round with care. Samuel watched him with wide eyes. "Mr. Harrow, are we really in danger?" Luke crouched to his level. "Danger's just a thing you prepare for. Being ready is what keeps you alive." The boy nodded, shoulders squaring as if trying on courage for the first time. Inside, Mara boiled water, prepared jars of broth, and rationed potatoes with thoughtful precision, every motion sharp, every decision deliberate. Luke stepped in with something in his hand, a small revolver. He offered it to her handle first. "Your husband teach you to shoot?" "A little," Mara whispered. Her fingers trembled as she touched the grip. Luke moved behind her, his voice low, steady. "Stand firm. Elbow loose. Breathe slow." She raised the gun. Exhaled. A spark of strength lit in her eyes. "We're not helpless," Luke said. For the first time since her world collapsed, Mara believed him. And for the first time since Luke buried his family, he felt like he wasn't fighting alone. Night dropped over the plains like a heavy curtain, swallowing the last of the Christmas light. Snow drifted in slow spirals, soft and deceptive, hiding danger beneath its quiet shine. Mara tucked the children into the safest corner of the house behind the stove. Blankets piled high, whispered prayers trembling on her lips. Luke checked the door one final time, sliding the iron bar into place. His revolver hung at his side, loaded and ready. "They'll come tonight," he murmured. Mara nodded. She'd felt it too, the way the wind shifted, the way animals went still, the way trouble seemed to carry its own kind of electricity. Outside, the storm began to thicken. Then, hoofbeats. Slow. Heavy. Intentional. Mara's breath caught. Samuel grabbed her hand. Through the frosted window, torchlight flickered. 3 riders. But not drunk this time. Not careless. They came with purpose. The leader raised a fist, signaling the others to spread out. Luke's jaw tightened as they circled the house like wolves casing a pen full of lambs. "Mara Ellison," the leader shouted through the storm. "You had your time. Come out and settle your debt." Luke stepped to the door. "She's not coming out." A moment of silence. Then a roar of rage. Gunfire exploded. Bullets slammed into the walls, sending wood splinters flying through the room. Mara shielded the children with her body as Luke pressed his shoulder to the door, firing through the cracks with measured precision. The attackers dismounted, fanning out. One man kicked at the door. Another smashed the window frame with a rifle butt. Snow blasted inside along with shards of glass. Luke didn't flinch. "Mara, keep the young ones low." She nodded, dragging Rosie and Ben behind the iron stove, the thickest metal in the house. Samuel crouched beside her, gripping a fire poker like a weapon. Another bullet tore through the wall, inches above Mara's head. Her heart hammered, but she held steady. One of the men tried climbing through the broken window. Luke's shot grazed his arm, sending him tumbling back into the snow with a scream. "Luke!" Mara gasped. Another torch flickered near the barn. One of the collectors was staggering toward it, sloshing whiskey over the dry wood, trying to ignite it. Luke didn't hesitate. He kicked open the door and dashed into the blizzard. "Stay with the children," he barked. The wind swallowed him whole. Mara pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from calling out. Inside, gunfire and shouts echoed. Outside, shadows lunged, boots slipped in the snow, fists slammed into bodies. Luke tackled the arsonist, sending the torch skidding across the ground. They wrestled in the snow, rolling down an icy embankment while the other 2 attackers advanced. Back in the house, Mara heard glass crunching beneath boots. Someone was coming through the side window. Her breath froze. She grabbed the revolver Luke had given her. The man's silhouette filled the shattered frame. He shoved his way inside, breath steaming, knife glinting in the dim light. "Where are you, pretty widow?" he sneered. Mara rose from behind the stove, legs shaking but voice steady. "Right here." She lifted the revolver and fired a single warning shot into the beam above his head. The crack echoed like thunder. Splinters showered down. The man stumbled back, startled. Outside, Luke punched the second attacker into the snow, blood marking the ground. The leader charged at him with a knife, slicing across Luke's coat. Luke staggered but stayed upright, fists clenched, breath ragged. Inside, Mara aimed again, this time level. "Leave us." Her voice didn't tremble. Not once. The knife-wielding attacker outside froze as the echo of her command rolled across the yard. Luke landed a final blow that sent the leader sprawling into a drift. Bloodied, beaten, shivering. The men exchanged looks, fear replacing rage. "This ain't worth it," one muttered. They limped to their horses, dragging their wounded leader. Within moments, the three riders vanished into the blizzard, swallowed by wind and darkness. Silence returned to the homestead. Slow, heavy, like the night itself had exhaled. Luke stumbled toward the porch. Mara ran out to him, catching his arm as he wavered. "You hurt?" she asked. "Only where I need to be," he said, and despite the pain, he offered a small, weary smile. Inside, the children peeked out, eyes wide with relief. The siege had ended. Christmas had been defended. And something unspoken, something powerful, passed between Mara and Luke under the storm-lit sky. Christmas morning broke soft and golden, like the sun was apologizing for the night before. Snow glittered across the plains in untouched waves, hiding the scars of battle beneath its gentle light. Mara stepped onto the porch, gazing across the horizon. The storm had passed. Peace, fragile but real, lay thick in the air. Inside, the children laughed as they tried sliding on the snow-covered yard. Their joy filled the homestead with a warmth far stronger than any fire. Luke watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, exhaustion pulling at his muscles but relief softening his face. "You should rest," Mara told him. Luke shook his head lightly. Work to do. And there was plenty. He helped patch bullet holes in the walls, fit new boards over the shattered window, and mend the barn door the attackers had cracked open. Mara worked beside him, hammering nails, steadying beams, passing tools with practiced rhythm. They moved as if they'd been doing this together for years. At one point, Luke paused, noticing her shiver. Without thinking, he draped his coat over her shoulders. "You don't have to keep doing that," Mara whispered. "Doing what?" "Looking after us." Luke held her gaze for a long moment. "Maybe I ain't looking after you. Maybe I'm just being where I'm supposed to be." She swallowed, emotion rising in her chest. She reached out, brushing snow from his collar. Later, as they prepared a warm stew, made from Luke's supplies, Mara stood close enough to feel the heat from his body. The children gathered around the table, bowls steaming in their hands. It was the first real meal they'd had together in months. After dinner, Luke moved toward his saddle. "I'll head out before trouble circles back. Don't want them thinking you're dependent on me." "But we are," Mara said, stepping toward him. "Luke, before you came we had nothing. No food. No hope." She hesitated, breath trembling. "Don't leave. Not today. Not anymore." Luke froze. He'd spent years keeping his heart buried beneath silence and work. But Mara's voice, soft, earnest, brave, cut through every barrier he'd built. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. Snow drifted between them. The world held still. Luke exhaled slowly. "Then I won't." And just like that, under a Christmas sunrise glowing gold across the frontier, a new family began to form, built not by blood, but by courage, kindness, and the fierce choice not to walk away. The frontier's a hard teacher. It don't hand out mercy easy. It don't care much for prayers said in the dark. But what it does remember is kindness. The kind that shows up in the dead of winter. The kind that stands its ground when danger knocks. Luke Harrow didn't ride past a starving family. He didn't look away from a widow's fear. He stepped into their storm and became the hope they needed. Wind rustles. Snow glimmers. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is simply not walking away. If this tale touched your heart, ride with us again. Like the video, share your thoughts in the dust of the comments, and subscribe for more stories forged in snow, fire, and the unforgiving heart of the Wild West.